Professor Nam-Yong Lee's short editorial. YouTube, short-form videos and deepfakes are turning government communication into propaganda and dividing the Korean people. The side effects of the YouTube platform are serious. Public affairs is the act of explaining the factual basis of government policy and the priority of the public interest to the people. Yet in the YouTube environment, policy explanations are easily repackaged, not for understanding but for mobilization. The moment state communication is consumed like partisan propaganda, people lose the language of persuasion and learn the language of labeling the other side as an enemy. The essence of YouTube is not the truthfulness of content, but the route and speed of exposure. Recommendation systems tend to privilege immediate emotional reactions over rational deliberation. If public affairs simply rides this structure as it is, virality defeats accuracy and state governance tilts away from policy competition toward an arms race for reach. The more partisan propaganda intensifies, the more people seek even stronger propaganda, and stronger propaganda deepens division all over again. If this vicious cycle continues, crisis management and long-term strategies for the economy and national security are repeatedly dragged into short-term battles over public sentiment. The purpose of public affairs must be restored around the public interest, and that restoration must be achieved not by slogans, but by redesigning the structure. YouTube Shorts and recommendation algorithms are shortening the public's time for judgment. Shorts often function by reducing information while amplifying emotional intensity. In a short window, when anger, ridicule, and fear are triggered, watch time and sharing tend to rise. In such an environment, the context of policy disappears, and what remains is often a single line that demonizes the other side. Recommendations create the illusion that what many people watched is what is trustworthy. People feel they chose, but in many cases, exposure is what chooses for them. If public affairs exploits this flow, it may gain an advantage in short-term mobilization, but the total stock of social trust declines rapidly. Policy decisions demand experimentation, data, accountability, and verification. When short-form politics dominates, verification becomes an annoying obstacle and agitation becomes an efficient tool. If the time people have for careful judgment cannot be lengthened again, democracy is left with procedures while its substance collapses. A deepfake is manipulated content that uses artificial intelligence to synthesize or alter a person's face, expressions, voice, or speaking style so that it appears as if the person actually said or did something. The core of the current issue is that platforms, AI-generated content, and opinion warfare are combining to mass-produce deceptive advertising. What makes this combination frightening is that political agitation and commercial fraud share the same amplification technology. When one side strengthens, the other strengthens as well, and the damage strikes both the public's emotions and their wallets. The damage is not confined to a single type of product. As it spreads to health supplements, quasi-drugs, cosmetics, investments, and various services, people's assets and health are threatened at the same time. When fake experts and fake reviews are combined to target older citizens in particular, losses grow quickly while recovery slows. Deceptive advertising is not merely aggressive marketing, it can become a gateway into a criminal ecosystem. Traffic that begins with a fake advertisement can lead to theft of personal information and phishing, and when the damage accumulates on a large scale, society as a whole loses trust. If the state cannot protect the people on the platform battlefield, people will ultimately suspect every warning. What the statistics reveal is not public opinion, but the power of traffic. YouTube is not merely a video platform, it is also a distribution network for news. Korea tends to show a higher share of news consumption through YouTube than the global average, which means that success or failure in public affairs can be determined not only by whether a message is right or wrong, but also by the platform's rules of distribution. When national agenda setting becomes subordinated not to the importance of policy, but to the platform's rules of victory, state governance ends up fighting an exposure race rather than reality. YouTube comments, communities, and short-form algorithms may look like public opinion, but they can also be an illusion produced by traffic. When that illusion governs policy, the state loses long-term strategy and becomes shaken by short-term reactions. For that reason, quality control in public affairs is not a matter of content aesthetics, but of an evidence system. Claims must be designed to circulate together with their grounds and verification pathways. If evidence-based explanations cannot catch up with the speed at which groundless certainty spreads, state governance will always lag behind. Domestic regulation may catch deceptive advertising, but platform responsibility is fragmented. A legal framework exists to regulate false and exaggerated advertising. The problem is that the AI deceptive advertising ecosystem is divided into platform agency production, distribution, redistribution, fragmenting responsibility so finely that each stage can shield itself behind the others and find an escape route. Targeting advertisers alone is not enough to stop repeated production. There are also mechanisms to regulate the distribution of illegal information in the information communications environment. However, it is increasingly clear that these mechanisms are insufficient to bundle sophisticated synthesis, manipulation, and context distortion into a single system and complete responsibility and transparency. Even though platforms have effectively become gateways to the public sphere, the explanatory duty and traceability duty of gateway operators have not been adequately institutionalized, and this is the core defect. What is needed now is not harder work at enforcement, but the completion of a responsibility structure. It must be unified into one system. Who must bear which obligations? What logs must be kept? How fast takedowns must occur? What standards must block re-uploads? And what procedures must restore PA to victims? Global standards are moving toward transparency, obligations, and traceability. The world is moving beyond a single disclosure line toward making it traceable, who created something, and what was changed. Synthetic content is not a problem that ends with a label, because transformation and re-editing repeat throughout the distribution process. Platform responsibility is also shifting from declarations to auditable obligations. Items such as complaint handling speed, re-upload blocking rates, blocking repeat offenders, and the strictness of ad review standards are becoming the norm as they are tied to GDU and enforcement. The core of the global standard is ultimately to bind disclosure, traceability, and responsibility into one. It must begin with disclosure, be followed by traceability, and end with responsibility. Only when this triangle is completed will the profit structure of deceptive advertising and opinion warfare be broken. Investigation and analysis must be designed around objective indicators. If the reality of opinion warfare and deceptive advertising is discussed only in emotional terms, society is pulled back into propaganda again. Platform dysfunction must be measured with observable indicators. Benchmarks include click-through rates by exposure, repetition of identical phrases, abnormal patterns in account networks, link propagation pathways, and correlations between ad conversion and damage reports. In particular, the essence of AI-generated content is that production cost has fallen so far that repeated production is easy. The structure to be seen is not a single deceptive advertisement, but thousands of variants circulating across platforms. Enforcement therefore must not be limited to deleting individual posts. It must connect and trace producers, agencies, platform tools, payment networks, and reward structures. Performance must be disclosed monthly, not only the number of takedowns but also re-upload blocking rates, harm reduction rates, and recovery speed must be disclosed together for public trust to be restored. Enforcement that is not disclosed is not felt, and policy that is not felt does not create trust. The essential task is to restore trust in public affairs as a system. When public affairs degenerates into partisan propaganda, people begin to doubt government announcements, media reports, and expert explanations all at once. In that state, society becomes one that does not move. even when real warnings are issued in a genuine crisis. Trust is not a resource built quickly, and once it collapses, the cost of recovery explodes. Public affairs must present facts and grounds, together with goals and side effects, costs and benefits. Mechanisms are needed to enforce these basic disciplines even in the platform environment. The more urgent task is not to defend the freedom of content that divides the people, but to reduce the freedom of structures that deceive the people. Freedom of expression and freedom to deceive are not the same. As deception decreases, freedom of expression becomes healthier. That is because a shared factual foundation is restored, enabling people to persuade one another again. Without a shared factual foundation, democracy shifts from deliberation to mobilization. Beyond disclosure obligations, the triangle of provenance, evidence, and responsibility must be completed. The first prescription is to combine AI-generated disclosure, not with mere wording, but with technology. Standards for content authentication and metadata should be expanded step by step so that original provenance and edit history remain, even if labels are stripped away. The second prescription is to make platform management responsibility an auditable obligation rather than a recommendation. Log retention, complaint handling standards, re-upload blocking rates, and penalties for repeat offenders must be specified in laws and administrative rules. Without standards, responsibility and performance both become blurred. The third prescription is to redesign the system so that groundless certainty becomes structurally disadvantageous in the domain of public affairs. Public institutions, political parties, public officials, and accounts with significant public influence require strengthened transparency obligations. When falsehood or manipulation is confirmed, corrections and public notices should be made to spread automatically. What people need is not more propaganda, but faster correction. Thank you for watching Professor Nam-Yong Lee's long editorial.